Good morning. Welcome. Glad to have you with us. Glad to be with you. For this holiday, we've put together a special program, and I brought on a gentleman that I met many years ago, and I'll give you a little bit of a history on him, but the entire program is going to be dedicated to the United States Constitution. You'll hear people oftentimes tell you that we live in a democracy. We don't. We have a democratically elected official that represents us, but we have a republic. That is to say, we have a rule book, an operating manual, if you will, and it's called the U.S. Constitution. We have, over the course of its history, managed, I think, to mangle both the document itself at times and certainly its interpretation. But let me just tell you that a few years ago, I don't know, about 10 years ago, I was in Washington, D.C., and I was asked to give a speech on the Constitution, give a talk to a bunch of senior citizens. And I had a pretty good understanding, I thought, of the Constitution, but I needed to get a little bit more information. And I was directed to Roger Pilon of the Cato Institute, and he took the time to sit down with me, and he did such a remarkable job. He was just a great teacher. And he is, in fact, the founder and director of Cato's Center for Constitutional Studies. And he has agreed to come on with us for this holiday and talk about the Constitution. And I really want to start with the Federalist Papers and what they were all about. And to that end, let me just say hello to Roger Pilon. Roger, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Glad to have you with us. The Federalist Papers, what were they all about? Why were they written?
Well, after the Constitution was drafted in 1787, it, of course, was sent out to the states to be ratified in the state conventions. And there was opposition to the new Constitution coming from the Anti-Federalists, as they came to be called. And so the authors of the Federalist Papers, which were written in newspapers, I should note, very learned disquisitions, but you wouldn't find that kind of thing in today's newspapers, but there they were in the newspapers of the day. They were written by the Federalists, in particular, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay, with the idea of encouraging the people who would be voting to ratify or not the new Constitution, that they should do so and why they should do so. And so what you have is a series of 85 entries into what has come to be called the Federalist Papers, which are available now in book form. And in each of these, the framers, the three authors who were themselves framers, set forth the arguments that they thought were the most compelling as to why the Constitution should be ratified. And one of the things that comes out of them is this. You had two warring camps during that period of essentially almost 2 years between 1787 and the time the Constitution was ratified by 9 states in the late summer of 1788, at which point it became effective. You have essentially two camps, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Anti-Federalists were arguing that this Constitution gave too much power to this new proposed central government. The Federalists argued, no, it doesn't. Look at all the restraints we have put into the document. So we had, in those two schools, two views. The very limited government view of the Federalists and the even more limited government view of the Anti-Federalists. So there wasn't, you could say, a socialist in the bunch. What we seem to forget today is how uniform the view was, notwithstanding these differences between these two camps. They both stood for limited government. It's just that the Federalists stood for a little more central government, and they did for two main reasons. First of all, for foreign affairs. The central government, the federal government or national government, such as it was under the Articles of Confederation, was extremely weak, and we were surrounded on three sides by powers greater than our own, the British, the French, and the Spanish. It was a dangerous world. We were working our way up to the French Revolution. And so they understood that if we were going to engage with the rest of the world in both commerce and in self-defense, we needed a stronger national government than we had. That was the first reason that propelled them to draft the new Constitution. And the second reason arose from the fact that under the Articles of Confederation, states had been erecting tariffs and other measures to protect local merchants and manufacturers from competition from out-of-state interests. And that was leading to the breakdown of the free flow of goods and services among the states. The founders stood for a free commerce among the states. And so they met also, one of the important reasons, to give Congress the power to regulate or make regular commerce among the states. It wasn't meant to be, as it is today, a power to regulate anything and everything under the sun for any reason imaginable. It was a limited power to ensure free commerce among the states. So those were the two reasons, greater national defense and free commerce, that propelled them after they had met in February of 1787 in Annapolis to decide to meet again in Philadelphia in the late spring of that year to draft the new Constitution. And so the Federalist Papers were designed to encourage the voters, such as they were at that time, to ratify this new document. And they succeeded, with North Carolina coming in after ratification and Rhode Island finally kicking and screaming in 1791.
We're talking about the Federalist Papers and the Constitution today. That'll be the sole topic of the program all day long. Roger Pilon is with us. He is the founder of the Cato Institute's Center for Constitutional Studies. We're starting off with the Federalist Papers. It's interesting as I look at it. You needed to have some central government to make sure that those rights guaranteed by the Constitution were in place no matter what state you lived in. I would think if you had the anti-federalist people, you would have separate states with no guarantee of certain rights.
Well, actually, that is exactly what we ended up getting, at least until the Civil War amendments, because the bill, well, first of all, if you're talking about those few rights that were included in the body of the Constitution itself, habeas corpus, ex post facto, etc., those were good against the states as well as against the federal government. But the Bill of Rights was added later. It was drafted by Madison in the first days of the new Congress, and it was then sent out to the states for ratification, and it was finally added to the Constitution 2 years after the first Congress met, namely in 1791. But the Bill of Rights did not apply against the states. And there's the decision that made that clear was the mayor of Baltimore, the Barron v. Baltimore decision of 1833, which held that the Bill of Rights applied only against the government that was created by the document to which it was appended, namely the federal Constitution. And that's why you could have, as late as 1836, in the state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, an establishment church. That was the last state to do away in 1836 with the establishment church. You could do that because the Bill of Rights did not apply. It took the Civil War amendments and the 14th Amendment in particular to apply the Bill of Rights against the states, as in Section 1, which the relevant part begins, no state shall abridge the privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States, etc., etc. And so there's your long answer to that short question.
So when people are arguing, Roger, about the Constitution and what the Founding Fathers meant when they wrote the Second Amendment, for instance, is then the Is the Federalist Papers, are the Federalist Papers then the definition, the way to resolve the problem? Look it up and see what they said? Because you wouldn't have that then. You wouldn't have the Second Amendment covered, would you?
No, but so therefore the answer to your question is sometimes the Federalist Papers are extraordinarily illustrative of what they had in mind. Sometimes they are not. You want to step back a little bit on this one to consider what it is that the court considers, as today when it handed down several important decisions. What it is that the court considers when it decides a case or controversy brought before it with respect to the Constitution. It looks, first of all, at the text, and that may settle the matter. There are some areas of the text that are very clear and others that are less so, and some that are very opaque. If that doesn't do the job, you want to consider the structure, which means that if you come out with a conclusion that is inconsistent with other parts of the document, then you probably ought to go back and reconsider your conclusion. The third thing is the original understanding, which usually means the understanding of the definition of the terms as they would have been understood at the time. And so those are the three main courses you would take in descending order of importance to determine what it is that a given passage may say with respect to the case before the court. Now, the Federalist Papers have some very instructive parts pertaining to that. There are many parts that set forth the broad understanding of the Constitution itself. In Federalist 51, for example, you have the famous passage, if men were angels, no government would be necessary.
All right, hold on.
If those who governed us were angels, we wouldn't have to worry.
All right, we've got to. Here's what we got to do. We got to pause here for just a moment. Roger Pilon is our guest, talking about the Constitution all morning on the Gary Nolan Show, the Zimmer Radio Network.